Hi, my name is Cheryl Smolkin, and today I'm interviewing Sooky Lee for HRinsider.ca. Sooky is the VP HR at ADP Canada, a leading provider of payroll, HR, and benefits management solutions. Today we're going to talk about HR metrics, what they are, where you get them, and why you need them. Welcome, Sooky.
Hi, Cheryl.
HR metrics used to mean how many people are attending the Christmas party and which ones are going to have chicken, which ones are going to have beef, and which ones are going to have the vegetarian option. What does HR metrics mean to you today?
They've changed a little bit. So I would say that they're a way to get specific, timely, actionable benchmarks on how your human capital is performing. So how well are initiatives working in the organization, and overall, how's the organization doing? Metrics have really changed. Earlier on, they were really about transaction performance metrics, so kind of how you're doing currently. And now they've migrated to become much more about predictive analytics to help you anticipate and make decisions about the future.
Interesting. So give me examples of some of the kinds of metrics that will be available to HR and the data that has to be collected to produce these metrics.
Sure. Let me give you a sample of some strategic ones that you can look at. One is benefits as a percentage of total compensation. It lets you know how well that you're doing and enables you to compare what your spend is to other organizations. You could also look at total compensation as a percentage of your overall operating expenses. It lets you know whether you're spending your money on the key priorities. Are they aligned appropriately? In addition, people costs are a big chunk of expenses in an organization, so it helps you manage those appropriately. Another one you might want to look at is profit per employee. This is your return on investment metric and enables you to determine how well your investment is performing, and then you can then compare to others in the industry as some examples.
What kinds of tools are available for employers to collect this sort of data and then produce the necessary reports?
So first is, I think, to use whatever you have. So if you're collecting manually, you might have an Excel spreadsheet. Or if you're lucky, you might have an HR information system. So have data about multiple areas of the organization, be it payroll, time and attendance, performance metrics around individuals, training, or succession planning.
Let's say an employer does use an HRIS system to track employee absence. How would that work? Who would enter the data, and what kinds of calculations and reports could the system produce?
Sure. I think the ideal is to have the data entered at the source. So either have the employee themselves or their manager enter the data. Alternatively, you might have an HR administrator who's entering data into the system, and then what you can look at is trend data over time to see the number of absences, benefit usage in terms of sick time, and then you can take that trend analysis and again compare to some benchmark data through an HR metric service as an example, and compare to others in your industry to see how you're performing.
So if I had an employee who over the last few months was frequently absent, how might I use HR metrics to decide on the most effective way to deal with that person?
Sure. So let's take an example of Sally, who's an employee of yours, and she's called in sick. If you're trying to determine whether she's actually abusing the sick time or not, you could take a look at her history and see how much she's taken over the past. You could then look for trends, maybe also look at her performance data and see, is Sally a good performer or a poor performer? If she's a strong performer and there isn't a trend of sickness, what you determine is she's actually not abusing. However, you might find out that someone else is. And if they are, the metrics gives you the ability to sit down and have a conversation with that person. It helps you minimize the lost productivity in your organization.
In your presentation to the Human Resources Professionals Conference earlier this year, you gave some examples of quotes regarding the perceptions of HR, and this was one of them. The executives criticize HR professionals for lacking business knowledge, observing that many of them work in a narrow administrative way rather than addressing long-term talent strategy and workforce planning. How can HR metrics help HR professionals change that perception and be perceived as more of a strategic partner?
Well, I think that HR has been a critical function, but I think in the past it hasn't always been strategic or valued in the same way. often seen more as a compliance, a must-do versus a want-to-do. And I think with metrics, it puts the power in the hands of the HR professional to not only help a leader understand how an organization is performing currently, but help them make better decisions, more strategic decisions, and drive different initiatives in the organization. So now leaders want to come to you first before they're making a decision around something that they might be implementing or around their organization. And what HR person wouldn't want that?
Well, that's right. So HR metrics have then evolved from more transaction-oriented performance measurements of the past to more outcome-oriented measurements that look to the future. Can you give me some examples of that shift?
Yeah, let me go back to the absenteeism example we talked about earlier. So not only can you look at data to understand who in your organization is away today and what kind of benefits they're using, you could then look at trend analysis over the past to actually predict when do most people call in sick? Is there a seasonal variation, for example? Then you could layer on the busy times in your organization, when you might actually need more people on staff and when people are likely to be away. This now enables you to do workforce planning ahead of time. You can staff for the peak periods or when more people are likely to call in sick.
Many companies like ADP are global, but there are still local and regional regulatory and cultural differences. How can HR metrics support a global HR strategy?
Well, it really enables you to identify what's important to your organization and measure those same things across multiple geographies. So now you can do an apples-to-apples comparison. It enables you to identify who's performing well, identify best practices, and then leverage those across the organization so that you're really maximizing your limited resources.
Attracting and retaining highly skilled employees will become more and more critical as the boomers retire and labor shortages increase. How can HR metrics help employers understand the employee life cycle and manage the leakage of the people that you want to keep?
I think often people tend to wait until employees exit, and they look at that as the point of leakage. But actually metrics demonstrate that you can have leakage throughout the entire employee life cycle or process. So for example, are you spending the right amount of resources on your top talent? Thus again, effectively using the limited resources that you have. Are you promoting the right people? It enables you to make sure that you're getting the most or the biggest bang out of your buck.
So my final question is, as a strategic partner in your organization, what do you like most about your job now that you don't have to organize the office holiday party?
So I've got a pretty great job. I get to really focus on building talent pipeline. I get to focus on developing employees and really helping my business, ADP, meet and deliver to our clients. So it's a lot of fun.
It sounds like it. Thank you very much, Sooky. I'm sure our discussion about the nature and value of HR metrics answered many questions in the minds of viewers.
Thank you, Cheryl.